I know that having a Siyum on something that you didn't finish chases away a lot of people. And so they're like, why am I going to a Siyum? I didn't finish it. Oh, don't worry, this is not just for people who finished Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. But let's start today. Today we have an amazing opportunity of doing a little bit of a Siyum on a year's project. And this is a project which took an exceptional amount of time, and it is worth it. It's worth it for all of us, because at 10 minutes a day, for 5 days a week, in 1 year you can finish all of the relevant halacha, and it's an amazing opportunity. So let's just talk a little bit about just the Siyum first of all, and I'd like to thank the following people who really stepped up to sponsor our learning this morning, and that is David Foyer for sponsoring to Yoel, and to Yoel Shmel, to Dr. David Levy, who's with us online, to Dr. Shalom Huberfeld, who is sponsoring in honor of all those who participated in this wonderful program. To Sam and Pamela Singer. Sam was actually one of the people who said we should do something. So I appreciate Sam stepping forward. He was here a second ago to say to us that it's necessary to happen. And also anonymously in honor of the Zechus that Bezras Hashem, this person's children should be Al Derech, should continue Al Derech Hashem, Bezra Hashem, Kain, Yihiyeh, Ratzon. I also want to thank Rabbi Alan and Chai Rothman. Rabbi Rothman actually is in Eretz Yisrael, but when he heard about this, he's been doing this all the way through, and he really wanted to make sure to also sponsor. So just whether it's the food, the learning, the brachos, this is a very special opportunity. I feel very special that we got to this moment in time. Let's take a quick step backwards. If you remember, just a quick recap on the Shulchan Kitzur and why it's so important, and then we'll do some actual like the diversity of cases, and then a little bit of reflection. So first of all, if you the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is written by a person by the name of Rav Shlomo ben Yosef Ganzri. He was born in 1804. He passed away in the year 1886. So he lived a long and wonderful life. He lived and spent most of his life in Ungvar, in the Royal Hungary. Today it's actually Ukraine, but that's very common in Europe because every 2 minutes they're switching borders. But he's currently living in the area of Ungvar, which was Hungary and is now present-day Ukraine. His father passed away when he was only 8 years old, and he was considered a very young, very brilliant young man. He was put under the tutelage of Lawrence-Cedarhurst, who was known as Herschel, who was the sharp-witted, who was very, very piercing insights into Gemara. And he at an early age, he was already spent a lot of time learning Torah. After he married, he became a wine merchant for a period of time. And in 1830, he at the age of 26, he abandoned commerce and became the rabbi of Brezovika, or Brezovich. In 1849, he returned as a dayan to Ungvar, and he served in many capacities. He served in a leadership capacity for the Jews of Hungary. He was part of the Jewish Congress in Budapest, and he was very committed to the average Jew, the regular Jew, being involved in Yiddishkeit, because at that time the general rule was those who were greatly talented would spend their lives learning and becoming rabbanim, but it was a very, very, very small group compared to the masses of people who just had to live regular lives. And he believed very strongly in Torah being democratized. And so what he did was, one of the things that he wrote was the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Just be aware of the fact that this is not his only work. He wrote many, many others, right? As an example, he wrote a book called Kestes HaSofer. Kestes HaSofer is on the topic of Safros, right? As a Sofer, all the Tikkunim, so it's used today all the time. He also wrote the Pnei Shloma, which is his commentary on Bava Basra. He wrote a commentary called Toras HaZevach, which was a halachic book on Shchita, for Shoichtem. He wrote a Sefer, which most people are not aware of is called Sefer Apiryon, which is a commentary on the Torah. I have it in my office and I use it frequently. Just very interesting insights into the Torah. He wrote a book called a fascinating book called Lechem V'Simla. If you've done Smicha, you know this because it's on the halachas of Nida. He also wrote a book called Ohalei Shem, in which he documented many names relating to Jewish divorce, because it's very important names are correct on Jewish bills of divorce. So he compiled a list as to what it should look like. He He wrote a book called Shem Shlomo on various sugyas and Shas. He wrote a book called Sefer Golu, which is a letter he wrote at the times of the Jewish Congress in 1869. He also wrote notes on the Chaye Adam, and he wrote many responsa. I think it really bespeaks a life of the rabbinate, meaning like all the things that he had to deal with in the rabbinate, he turned into his Svarim, but the book that he's most well known for is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's very unusual. He's a very unusual person in this respect, because actually Kitzur Shulchan Aruch had 14 reprintings during his lifetime. Meaning it wasn't one of these things that posthumously, picked up, right? In his lifetime, this was like wildfire. People loved this book, and it was translated from Hebrew into Yiddish. And today it's been translated into many, many more languages. But even during his lifetime, there was a pirush written on it during his lifetime. This is very unusual to have such a thing. There was a individual who wrote, Rabbi Yeshaya Cohen wrote Miskeres HaShulchan, which means the edge of the table around it. And because it was reprinted so many times, many people sent him letters saying, I don't understand this, what about that? And therefore he actually, in his reprintings, he wrote notes, he amended things. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch we have is not like the original version, because it's as a response to the many people who wrote letters to him about his work and disagreed with him in many ways, which is phenomenal. What makes it unique? So it makes it unique in a number of ways. First of all, it's brevity. It's very short compared to many of the other halakhic compendiums. And that requires an immense amount of skill. When they used to ask him, they said, Shlomo, why did you call it a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch? Meaning like, it sounds a little bit like, like a diminution that you called this. So you used to always say, his response says, Ta'arich lefonai shulchan, and it doesn't say Ta'arich lefonai shulchan. It doesn't say extend the table, it says arrange the table. And now what I'm doing is arranging the table as well. Another thing that's amazing about him is he's exceptionally clear. His clarity is one of the unique things that makes the Sefer unique, and that is that he does not wade into large machloksim and present 20 opinions. He goes through the opinions and he decides what to do. I've found in general that he's somewhat more machmir than a little bit of the halacha that we learn today. But that's not because he's saying, I'm going to do this to hedge. He actually paskened in a particular way, and therefore he didn't leave us hanging when it comes to these things as well. Also, his primary sources are 3. He used 3 primary sources that were available to him in terms of contemporary halacha. The one was the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is why, by the way, in Chabad, Kitzur is a very big deal, because that was one of the things that he used. Another thing he used was the Chaye Adam, Rav Danzig, which he wrote a pirush on. And the third is he also wrote on using Rav Yaakov of Lissa, who wrote the Chavos Das, the Makor Chaim, Derech Chaim on Shulchan Aruch, and so he used him, and those are his 3 trajectories, or the tributaries, which formed what ultimately was a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. What is also unique about his pirush is that, unlike most pirushim, he throws in philosophy. So he throws in a few whys into his explanations, which is very helpful to the reader, who really appreciates not just the what, but the why as well. And also it is comprehensive, as opposed to most halachic books. Mishnah Berurah, as an example. Mishnah Berurah is a commentary on 1/4 of halacha that we know today, which is called Orach Chaim, which is Shabbos, Brachos, Tefillah, all those things. Wonderful, fantastic. But what about business? What about marriage? What about loans? What about Avodah Zarah? Right? There's nothing like that in the Mishnah Berurah unless it happens to tangentially connect. The Kitzur says, it looks through all the Dalet Chilkei Shulchan Aruch, the 4 sections of halacha, and he says, I'm going to extract the pieces which are relevant to life, and I'm going to omit the parts which are not. So you'll leave parts of Orach Chaim out, and you'll interject parts of Yordeh, Even Ezer, and Chosh Mishpat in, which is why it's so fascinating, because you'll have access to halacha, which you simply wouldn't have otherwise, because most people don't get to those areas in halacha. So what I wanted to do is, because I know it's a Siyum, and I wanted to just do a quick go through on 13 different questions, which just came up around, we'll call it in the vast array of complexity of halacha, and then just close this up. Just to give us as a quick reminder as to how complex this is. So let's start at the beginning. Just to give a sense of the diversity of this that we've done together. So getting dressed in the morning, right? So what are the halachas of getting dressed? You say like, that's not halacha. Halacha starts when I get to shul, right? Not so. So the Kitzur points out, this is in Simon Gimel, the Kitzur points out, and this is such a profound example of his halacha. The beginning of Simon Gimel says, but the Torah tells us that you should be modest when you are with your God. The this is such a counter-Western culture idea, is you get dressed and undressed modestly, which means you don't walk around without clothes, even by yourself. Which means to say is that there's a certain expectation of personal modesty as well. We are so not that culture. We're a culture, we have mirrors everywhere, right? We like to look at ourselves, and culture pushes us to look at ourselves, compare ourselves, and so on. That is not the Torah way. And the reason he says, Al Yomar, a person should not say, I'm at night, in dark, in room within room. Nobody's going to know me already. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Malei kol ha'ar kol ha'aretz kavod v'kachashecha ka'or lefanah. Hashem sees you. So why are you prancing around like that? Right? So that's what the Kitzur says. It's just an example of like just such a simple thing that relates to our halachas. Let's move to the next topic, which is really fascinating. This is such an important question. Is not that anybody ever is in this category, but imagine that you come to shul and it's late. What do you do? So what the Kitzur does is he does a beautiful thing. He summarizes a number of different disparities in halacha, and he reminds us, a quick reminder, the most important thing to be doing when you get to shul is that you are davening b'tzibur. You need to get to the Shemona Esrei with everybody else. Everything else falls around that. But let's say you arrive, and it's in the middle of Psukkah de Zimra, and then you need to make sure you get to the Amidah in time. So what do you do? How do you triage it? So if you remember, he gives us such a simple formula. It's so easy. The main part of Psukkah de Zimra is, which paragraph? Is Baruch Shemarei Yishlach, the brachas before and after, but you need to have something in the middle of that sandwich, and that is Ashrei. Right? Because we know that the Ashrei talks about what's called Hashkacha Klalis, that God runs the entire world. If you ever take a moment to appreciate Ashrei, it is all general. It's all general. But kol drachov, kol ma'asov, kol Hashem, kol karov, posechas dechos b'lachol chayros, and everything's about all. It's all big, broad strokes about Hashem running this world. Phenomenal. And so that's the main point. We need to educate ourselves before we get to Kriyas Shema, its brachos, and the Shemona Esrei. But let's say you have a little more time. So then he reminds us that actually the Ashrei is the 145th chapter in Psalms. In the Psukkah de Zimra, the next 5, 146, 147, 148, 149, 150, all follow. Those are the 5 Halalukas. So he points out that there's a triage in them. And that is, if you have just a little more time, you do Baruch Shamar Ashrei, the 5th Halaluka, which is 150, and then Yishtabach. You have a little more time, you do the 3rd one as well. So it goes Ashrei, Halaluka number 3, Halaluka number 5, and then Yishtabach. You have just a little more time, then you do all 5 of them. It's just understanding the triage. And this happens to me quite a number of times where I'm rushing, whatever it was, to get in. And to remember, it's so easy to remember. Baruch Shema Yishtabach Ashrei, any more time, Halukah number 5, any more time, Halukah number 3, 5, any more time, Halukahs 1 through 5. And then, by the way, there's more after that. But that's just the basic triage in terms of getting there as well. What does he do? He summarizes in a way that's very palatable, very easy to access. Let's move into another halacha. Is there a bracha on flowers? Yes. Right? So most people just don't even realize this. You smell the roses all the time. Do you say a bracha on that? Ready? By the way, what we just did was we just looked at the halacha of coming into davening is in Simon Yudalet, the halachas of Psukkah de Zimra. But the next halacha about smelling the flowers is in Simon Nun Hey 55, where he talks about Birkas Hareach, and he points out that there's different types of Birkas Hareach. Right? So it depends what you're smelling. So if you're smelling something which is actually the wood of the item, so as an example, cinnamon, it's borei, I'd say v'samim. If you're smelling something which is actually the grass, or let's say a herb, it is borei isvei v'samim. And then there's other things which don't fall into this category, which is borei minei v'samim. I remember, I was at a wedding. It was a Sephardic wedding, and at the Sephardic wedding it kind of feels like Havdalah a little bit, right? So, like at Bristol as well, all the brachas, all the senses are being activated at Sephardic weddings. So I remember they had a borei minei v'samim, and I got called up for the borei isvei v'samim. I felt like it was like an added kibbutz just to include me as well. It was wonderful. Anyways, I got the grass. So the question is where do flowers form the category? So he talks about this, and he says He points out like this. He says, in this in Nun Ches Gimel, Im ze sheyotz mimenu hareach hu eitz or min eitz. If what is emitting the smell is actually the stem or a type of wood, he believes that a lot of flowers actually are borei atzei v'samim. They're not the fruit, which is borei hanas and reach tov apeiros. It is actually part of atzei v'samim, which is interesting because there is a large dispute about this in halakha, and this is what I added in actually when we learned this around the first time. It depends what it is. So as an example, the halacha is that these would get atzei v'samim, would be azaleas, cedars, gardenias, the myrtles, honeysuckle, jasmine, juniper, lavender, lilacs, pine, roses, rose geranium and spruce. Those would all get a borei atzei v'samim. But the following would get an isei v'samim, which would be a daylily, lily of the valley, lemongrass, marigold, mint, sweetest elysium, tulips, violets. Those all get a borei isvei. Now, which is all found actually, by the way, in the commentary on the Kitzur, because they're pointing out that there's different types of flowers. Who thinks about this? Who actually thinks about this? Shmuel, yeah.
Is that with the intent to smell, or
yes.
if I walk into the room and it's smelling?
With intent to smell. But again, let's say you're walking past and you know that it's this time of spring and you know that the lavender is in full bloom. Right? So you should make a point to
stop in
100%.
Okay.
Just, as they say, stop and smell the roses, right? So it's important to be able to do this as well. By the way, he does discuss the whole discussion of coffee, right? So can you say a bracha on smelling coffee? So coffee is, by the way, sometimes coffee smells better than it tastes, right? Right? It's fantastic. So can you say a bracha on coffee? So coffee is a bean, right? So he discusses this topic, and it depends. If you're drinking the coffee and you happen to smell it, then you're not smelling it. You're just drinking it, right? So if you decide to just smell coffee, so if it's instant coffee, a little secret, the smell in instant coffee is actually put into it. Right? Instant coffee does not have a smell, okay, because it's already processed. But let's say bean coffee, and they make it smell like that, so you make it feels like, but it's not. That doesn't have a smell, which is why you get to the bottom of
the new jar.
The new jar smells great. The bottom of the jar does not. So just sorry to burst anybody's bubbles, but let's say freshly ground coffee. If you ground coffee. We have a grinder in our house, and so if you grind real coffee just to smell it, you do say the bracha as well. Hanos and reach tov apeiros, because it's the bean. Okay, be it as it may. Just a very basic halacha.
But if you don't know, you always make a borei mina.
Mina is which is why on once a Shabbos the Ashkenazim do the default, right? But you'll notice if you go to a Sephardi Havdalah, they are more specific as to what you are doing. So if it's a cinnamon, it's atzeh, as an example, which is a lot of times what people do. Okay, let's go a little further. Let's talk about prayers. So, is there a prayer for business, for doing well in business? The answer is yes, there is. This is in Siman Nun Ches. Sorry, whoops. I was just there before. Sorry, Siman Samach Aleph, where there's a halacha that a person who is about to embark on a business says, which means to say is that let's say you're about to collect your produce. It's a little harder today because everything's so instantaneous and it's online. But you have a bracha to say, you have a yiratzon to say, Hashem, you should send me success in this gathering, in this business. And if you already started collecting, Baruch Hashanach bracha b'kriyazeh, you say a bracha on having done this. By the way, similarly, he said this about going to, let's say you go undergoing a medical procedure. There's a yiratzon v'necha Hashem l'kenev l'kenev l'seinu shetzehei eisek zeh v'rufua ki roi v'chen amatzah. There's a bracha said after you recover as well. He talks about all these things. I had the schus of when I went under in the operating theatre, before they were about to just do that, I like to put the patient out so you don't have to worry, I can carry on talking about lunch. But so I asked them to stop, and I said, please listen to me as I said this. So I said this bracha, I said this yiratzon before they put me out, and I wish them all that God is doing their work, and I should thank you for being part of this. But you can say these things. This is all part of it. Similarly, if let's say there's been a drought, there hasn't been rain. You know that this last Shabbos, a week ago, there was incredible rain in Israel. A huge amount of rain, thank God, right? Which is a bracha, gishmei bracha. It's not a nuisance. It's gishay bracha. So there's a bracha said. There's a bracha which is said on rain as well, which he records as well. He says, "Kashiyardu agashamim im yardu kol kach v'rabo kol aretz shemalim abad huas min amatar v'olchim l'kraset tzrichim levarech aleihem." There's a bracha said on rain, which is said in the land of Israel, or at least in places where it's so much appreciated and makes a significant difference. What about the following? These are just examples. Marketing. So, are you allowed to market by using children? Right. So, what does that mean? Are you allowed to hand out candies so that you'll pull the parents back into your store? Are you allowed to do that kind of thing? So now so he says, and this is in Simon Sama Base, you're allowed to incentivize children. You are allowed to drop prices below the market value. Other people are not allowed to halachically impede upon this. However, you're not allowed to mix bad fruits among good fruits. I mean, you can drop your prices, but you can't be deceptive about what you're doing. Meaning, when you're giving the kids candy, when you're offering a special deal, you're not being deceptive. You're just telling people what you're doing. If your neighbor can drop prices, the same one can afford to drop prices as enough to breathe, to be able to do that, go for it. But it's all what the market will bear. But you can't be deceptive. So you can't change measures. You can't mix in bad things. You can't misrepresent your things. He says, meaning if, let's say, the taste is recognizable, you are allowed to mix because then the buyer, but you cannot allowed to mix the bad ones with the good ones and then say, okay, it's all on the good side as well. Just going into a completely different realm, which is something which affects a lot of us a lot of the time. What about travel? So it's interesting. This is a very good example where the Kitzur says, he says, it's not that he's going through the Shulchan Aruch, he's going through life. And he's saying, you travel, here's the halachas. You should make sure to daven at such a time. You should make sure that if you're in a house of a Jew, just check if they keep Shabbos to know if you can eat their kashrus. Like there's a lot of things that he puts into the halachas of travel. But in this as well, we point out when should you say Tefillah Saderech. This is a halacha which is less known to people, and that is you should say Tefillah Saderech after you say it al bracha. Which is why? Because it's seen as a bracha samucha lechaverta. Why it doesn't start with a baruch? It's yiratzon lefanecha, which means say why is it a bracha at the beginning? So it's leaning on another bracha, which means you should ideally do it after you daven shachris when you say Birkas HaShachar, or if you've already davened earlier this morning, you should stop and say a bracha on something. You say take out a chocolate bar, you take out a drink, say a bracha, and then say Tefillah Saderech, so that the Tefillah Saderech is leaning upon that bracha. And it's another halacha, just the halachas of travel as well, which is most people are just not aware of necessarily as well. If we move it a little further, guilt. This is really, really fascinating, and again, it's not touched upon, which is why it's so important. And he talks about that. This is for the male department over here. Is men who have seminal emissions. Like what is their responsibility? And he talks about the halachas that pertain to this. And in fact, he quotes a sefer which is found in the. One second. I think I skipped this over here. It's in Siyum 1 Kuf Nun Aleph. Am I in the right place? Yeah. In Kuf Nun Aleph, he talks about at the very end. He quotes a sefer called Yesod Yosef. Right? Yosef, why Yosef? By the way, why is that book called? Because Yosef is the one who is the notion of Yesod, which is Kabbalistically relates to this particular issue. And Yosef was the one who was challenged in this particular area. And he points out that for men, it's not just a physiological phenomenon, it relates also to the cleanliness of their thoughts. There's an expectation on Jewish men to guard where their eyes go or don't go. And although that is $1 billion advertising industry in order to get men to buy and look at things that they shouldn't be looking at, in Judaism that's not how we operate. We have the responsibility not to be looking right. And if a man is therefore spills seed needlessly, there are tikkunim. And so as an example, just to summarize a number of these, he says a person should go under a tisha kabin, which is a person should take a shower essentially, right? Which is as opposed to the regular mikvah. And he says the following: he says, if the person is able to be a sandek, who's one of the tikkunim, that there's going to be milah on his lap. who befront the US Sunday Gates Laniyim, perhaps for people, the Harbos Bitstock Laniyim, to give charity to poor people, to have to keep Shabbos very carefully and have a house lit with candles, to love those who love Torah, to daven with kavana and crying, to choose actively to be humble. When people curse you, just let it go. When you decide to do a mitzvah, do it with passion, with energy. So there's passion inside you. You're sort of redirecting passion that was misappropriated in the right direction. To educate one's children to Yerushalayim, to bring a child up who's not your own. In your own house, to make weddings, try to get an aliyah once a month. Don't make the shul mad about this one. And make the barachas loudly. To actually read silently when you're getting an aliyah. To be among the 10 first in shul to make the minyan, also tikkun chatzos b'v'chi, to do tikkun chatzos, folks, that's a tough one. And do it later on. So just to give an idea, he's not shying away from some of the more complicated parts of Judaism, and this is really helpful. I've had to send people in this direction. This is not talking about, God forbid, adultery. It's not. That's a separate department. God forbid. This is simply a man by themselves, and unfortunately for you, many young men, a really big challenge. And this is part of it. Education. Now, just a few questions when it comes to education. You think, wow, is this halacha? The answer is yep. So like let's say, may I tell my kids to switch off lights on Shabbos? The answer is no. You're not allowed to tell your children to do Isurim. What about should I bring my children to daven in shul? So it depends. So he says the following: you should try to bring your children to shul to answer Amen, to start responding, to be educated at a young age. It's amazing that even a child can get into Olam Haba just through this. He says, they should stay in shul with a certain degree of respect and awe. The ones who are just going to make a lot of noise, don't bring them to shul. Right, so it should be a privilege to shul. It shouldn't just be, and it's always a balance. You want to excite them. On the other hand, right, it's a place of yira. He points out that the main mitzvah of chinuch is on the schools you pay. No, that's not correct. It's actually on the father and the mother, and therefore it is a primary responsibility. It is not outsourced. There's no babysitting service for education. Okay, this is and he goes through some of the halachas. By the way, in this topic, he points out one should never threaten a very scary punishment for a child that doesn't happen now. Because you should never say, God forbid, that in a week's time, because what you did now, you're going to, because he said, unfortunately, suicide is a real thing. Right? You have to be very, very careful. He says you punish a child related to the activity that they went through, but you don't, God forbid, allow fear to set in. This one is a little bit of a shocker for me. Candelabras. So in the halachas of Barazari, Kuf Samach Vav, he points out that there's one aspect of halachas which is you're not allowed to replicate things which were made in the Beis Hamikdash. Right? So which means that you're not supposed to have a 7-branched candelabra. Right? And he points out there's a Yesh Omrim that even a circular one, which is a bit of a shock for us, because we happen to have one of these, is also included. This, according to some Yesh Omrim, some are not concerned about this, but the point is you're not allowed to replicate the Klei HaMikdash, one being this as well, which is just fascinating. I did not come across this at all beforehand. Let's go a little further, just again, just the complexity of this. What about the following? Let's say you're taking your wagon to the market, right? And so you have your horse-drawn wagon, and then you also want to bring with you your goat. Are you allowed to tie your goat to the back of the wagon? So it comes along, the answer is no. That's called kilei behema. Kilei behema does not just mean cross-breeding animals, but cross-working animals. The Torah tells us you're not allowed to have an ox and a donkey plowing together, and that would mean to say is and the general understanding is this because the one is stronger than the other, and it's going to be a burden upon the weaker animal, in this case the donkey, to plow, and that affects, he says, even attaching it to the back of your wagon, because it's going to struggle to keep up, and that is a part of this Isra as well. Very, very fascinating. Most people are not aware of this particular issue. What about the following? This is a very interesting question. Oh, I have no idea about this. You're not allowed to make shatnez, right? You're not allowed to put Semer Pishtim together. But am I allowed to, on the bima on our shul, are we allowed to have a shatnez cover to that? Am I allowed to have a paroiches of the aron, which is shatnez? The answer is, actually it depends. So for the bima, you're not allowed to. For the paroiches, you are allowed to. Is that interesting? Why? And the answer is that you're not allowed to get any benefit, like benefit from touch, from acts, for so. Like so, people could sometimes wipe their hands, or they'll rest their hands on it, and it provides warmth to them. Nobody is supposed to be hiding behind, touching, wrapping themselves in the paroiches, right? And so, because it doesn't provide that level of chamimus, of warmth, it is therefore not subject to the halachas of whereas they say, the curtains in my house, yes, right, because kids hide in them all the time and do all kinds of things, as opposed to the paroiches in a shul, which is just another very, very remarkable halacha. There was an halacha that was asked to me just recently. Somebody had a situation where she had a roommate. She was the primary in terms of paying rent. She subbed it to somebody else to help her pay. This person did not pay rent, made a mess, destroyed her property, and then left. Then blocked her on her cell phone, wasn't able to get in touch with. And then her father, the father of this person, said, "I'll pay you $400 and we'll call it even," which is a fraction of all the amount of missed rent that she was owed. But the thing is that this person, this AWOL rentee subletter, also left behind her air conditioning unit. Was the renter of the apartment allowed to claim the air conditioning unit, which was worth several $100s, as at least as a payment for this as well? Can a person take the law into one's own hands? So in the halachas of Toyin V'Nitzan, in these halachas, again, we're very deep into Kosher Mishpat. So in this case, the Shulchan Aruch says, Yachol Adam La'asos Din La'atzmai. A person does have the right to exercise din for themselves, but what case is it? Somebody took your bicycle and it's in their yard. You know it's there. You are allowed to retake the possession that was taken from you. You are allowed to remove people who are in the way until you get it back. And then he points out it depends if it's public or not public. If it's public, it's more complicated because people misunderstand it, right? Think about every time a Jew counter protests a Hamas rally. That's what all they're looking for is these violent Jews, taking advantage of these poor innocent Palestinians walking through the streets. So one has to be conservative out of context. In public, it's less simple. But in the case that I was asked, just as a clarification, that is not the case. It wasn't her air conditioning. But I was owed money, which means there still needs to be due process. And so in that case, the halacha in that particular case is you be mazmin that person to base 10. When she ignores it, then you can claim it because she's ignored due process, and therefore won't be allowed to do it. It's complicated things that happen. This is a little bit of a shocker. Legal action. Are you allowed to hand over Jews to the authorities? Generally speaking, when it was an illegitimate authority, which was most of Europe, where things were not transparent, halachas know it's called the Moiser, and it's more complicated. What about, are there any exceptions to this? The answer is yes. The example he gives is counterfeiting. So let's say there's a Jew who is printing money, right? In that case, that person has a din of what's called a roidev. That person is considered a liability to the Jewish community because it is inevitable that person will be discovered, and when that person is discovered, that is going to mean that many Jews will be killed. Right, because it's going to reflect terribly on the Jewish community, and it will be the pretext for the next pogrom, the next attack as well. Which means that a person has a responsibility of handing over Jewish counterfeiters as well, because of the impact it has on the community. He says, many are going to be in dinner command right. You first you warn them to cease and desist. You have to be very careful that you have to say that this is an exception. This is not a good Jew. This person is doing what shouldn't be done, and you have to therefore hand them over as well.
That law has been expanded to other areas in
For sure, and unfortunately, this affects others. Sexual offenders, right? As an example, forget the legalities of being a mandated reporter. Just forget that that's a legality, right? Just understanding that when you push that underneath, you are killing multiple people in the future.
What about
right?
Madoff?
So therefore,
What about Madoff with the money? Would that have
that's a really good question. I mean, unfortunately, the longer he was around, the more people were defrauded. But unfortunately, it's only every other week that we see the front page of a paper with a Jew.
But that would have been
So
allowed.
I don't know how specific it would work in each case. But unfortunately, the case has been built against Jews many times now because of this. Finally, I'll just conclude. Just goes in the last 20 halachas, we learned last 20, 30 were about Avelos, and so the question is let's say the will and testament of a person said that they're going to be buried in their suit, right, their favorite, black pinstripe suit. Are you allowed to do this? The answer is no. The halachas is that a person who's buried is buried in shrouds. Shrouds are simple clothing, so simple they don't even have hems. Right? There's no edges to them. There's no pockets to shrouds. Nobody's taking anything with them. Right? They're very simple clothing made of white cloth, and if one has ever had the schus to be involved to see this process, it's very, very simple. It's the most simple clothing. It's pure when a person is buried, and he goes on to describe these are the halachas, and he goes on to describe that a man should be buried in their talis that they wore to daven. Right? Not a ceremonial talis, meaning people will say, I like to keep it for sentimental purposes. Nope. The best talis to bury a person in is the one they davened in, if it's for a man as well. And he says, this is going to be reflecting on the person as well as they get to the world to come. So just these are like 13 separate halachas, and just to see, this is like a gambit, right? This of whether it's in the store, on the street, in my room, like there's so many different places where halacha plays a role. All this in the Kitzur Shulchan, I just randomly went through these as well. Let's just as we kind of wrap up, I just want to make the following observation: is that for me this is a big deal this last year because which started last summer, where I was really thinking that a lot of the times I prepared a shiur and I wanted to just make sure everything was right. What it was is I ended up going to the Kitzur, and I found that he generally did a very great summary of the halachas, not everything, but he did a great summary of what we were going through. And I was like, this is like embarrassing. Why don't I know the whole Kitzur? So I said, okay, I really want to do this, and I figured out that there's 221 chapters in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. If you go through 221 chapters, I figured that if you divide them into a weekly basis of a 5-day week, I was very into a 5-day week. Because I know that people fall off the edges on weekends, right? The schedule changes, it's hard to keep up. If you do a 5-day week and you divide the longer ones into 2, or sometimes 3, you finish it in around 250. 250, if you look at the weeks of the year, and 5 days a week is roughly a year, right? So I was like, oh, look, you can finish this all in a year if you do it on a natural process. At the same time, I was contacted by the OU All Halacha, and they said, oh, we're starting this new Kitzur Yomi program, Khan Sukkos. This is last year. And we want you to be part. I was like, that's great. And they said, but the hitch is it's a 7-day cycle based on the pages. So basically it's like Siman Aleph to Dalet. And then tomorrow's going to be Siman Aleph Hay to, and it goes on like that. And I was like, I don't think that makes sense. I don't like 7-day cycles because people don't follow them. Number 2 is, I'm sorry, go for the Daf people, amazing. But I've noticed that it's very hard for 7-day cycles for a lot of people's schedules. And number 2 is I don't like the idea of stopping and starting in the middle of ideas.
Exactly.
So what I did was I realized, originally I said, I'll do both. I'll do the 7-day cycle, I'll do the 5-day cycle, and I'll cut and splice. Not a good idea. But more than it wasn't a good idea, I realized that the 5-day cycle approximated the 7-day cycle because if you do a full siman, by doing 5 of them, you roughly accomplish what you did in 7, you divide it up by subject. By pages. So I said to the OU, if you wouldn't mind, can you cross-list simonim to the daily halacha? And they said, with pleasure. And so I sort of pushed in the 5-day cycle into their 7-day cycle. which means that sometimes you'd have two simanim next to each other because it overlapped, or sometimes just be one siman for 2 days because of the way it worked. But I felt that that was a worthy contribution. While we were doing this, Baruch Hashem, it was a very special special opportunity. I know that on my own podcast and with our EU, there was roughly 350 people doing this a day, which is wonderful across the world. I was in South Africa recently, and somebody said, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I'm like, yeah. And it's nice to have that opportunity. It made me have to work really, really hard because every share that's received on 10 minutes is over an hour of preparation. So you can do the math of 256 shirim, what that looks like in terms of time. But a special shout out goes to Moshe Majeski, who called me over the summer and said, and I was mentioning to him about how I wanted to do Kitzur. He's like, I so want to do this. It's such a great idea. And he and his chevra were responsible for sponsoring this, allowing me the space and time to actually even say that I could use this time. That money goes straight to the shul to be able to first of all our learning group internally and allow us to even use that time. So the shul is gaining from this, and it allowed me to do this. I remember that I had to work really hard around surgery time in February to make sure that when I was going for surgery, I had to carry on. But so that's the point of a machayev. If you have something you have to do it. No excuses, right? I remember last Thanksgiving, I was away for Thanksgiving, and at 6 o'clock in the morning before Shachris on Friday Thanksgiving, I was busy preparing the halachos of Kriyas Torah. That was where we were up to at that point in time, because if you do something, you have to keep doing it all the way through. So it's ol al tzavarecha. It's a burden on one's neck. But that's the point as well. And it happened to be that when I was recovering this year, somebody got me a beautiful book. Who got me this book? David, it wasn't you. David's usually my provider for all fantastic literature, which is why I'm educated, because David. But somebody gave me a book called The Prophet in the Andes, which I've spoken about numerous times. Oh, that's right, Yael gave it to me when I was sick. Thank you. Yael and Paul gave it to me. I was so moved by this book. It was a very beautiful book. Thank you. It really expanded my palate. But one of the things that I learned in that book was that this incredible Peruvian family, the Villanova family, out in Peru, who discovered Judaism, discovered it because they read 2 books. They read Tanakh, the Bible, and they read the Kitzur in Spanish. That's how they arrived at Judaism and they met Aliyah. And I was like, wow, that's the best thing. So if you want to learn Nach, go to Tanakh Yomiyah. You want to learn Kitzur? Join me on this. We got this where it's all at. You get the framework of all of this. In terms of next projects, just to be aware of how this is working, there's never an end to the process of learning. So this year on Sunday mornings, what we're doing is now the why. So we're doing the Jewish book of why, and the idea is like this: is to take everything that he said, all the whats, and to deepen all the whys into that. What that's going to turn into, God willing, just so you should know, it's in the works right now, is a new app, and it's going to be called the What and Why of Judaism. The what part is already finished, right? That's all the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and it's going to be with the text. On the 5 or 7 day cycle, but the why is the next part, which is what we're doing on Sunday mornings. I'm also transcribing. I'm turning into the why piece, which is the why for all the practices of Judaism related to all the whats. Be'ezras Hashem, and that's going to be, I think, a very, very fascinating thing. We're trying to work with a little bit of AI, so it's using that as the framework of reference for the answers it's going to provide. So it's not just using useless information out there. We'll get there in Be'ezras Hashem in the coming months. And that'll be it. I want to close with the words of the Kitzur himself. This is not actually found in all of them, or online, but he says the following, because remember he concludes the halachas al avelos. Pretty depressing way to end, right? But that's the end of life, right? Because he starts at the beginning of life and he ends at the end of life. And he ends by the pasuk of Bila. By the way, most people misquote that pasuk all the time. It's not the right place to remind people because it's usually a funeral when they're saying this, but they usually miss out one of the names of Hashem. Right? You need to read the pasuk if you're going to say it. Hashem will wipe away tears and death should be forgotten forever. Blessed Hashem will give strength to those who are tired and strength to those who don't have koach. And he says, now he quotes the pasuk, the house of Jacob should go out and walk in the light of God. If the person says, we will walk, right? We will walk. Why did it say, you should go out, right? You should go out and we should walk. It is unnecessary, it's tautological. He says, take a look at the Al-Sheikh. I'm going to suggest my own idea. A person is trying to help the community. That person won't go to Gehenna because it shouldn't be that their students are doing the right thing and they're going to go to Gan Eden and they themselves will not. He says, when a person says, you should go, it's connected to in the light of God. And how you read this is, the house of Jacob, Jews, go in the light of God. And if you're going to do what's right and you listen to what's right, even I, who may have made mistakes, because in the public light, people always make mistakes, then at least I, as a person in the public light, what's it saying is writing this book, which will last for many, many generations, hopefully I will join you because you did the right thing. Meaning, it's because of your zuchus of everybody else is doing it. Blessed is Hashem, it shows the sages and in their teachings. Hashem, please allow me to be part of the people who do good for the public. To give them merit. And maybe I'll also merit to be with them. To purify the soul. And that which I sinned in front of you, you will erase. You'll cleanse with your great mercy, and return me in great in Shuva. That's how he concludes the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's not your average book cover self-reflection autobiography. You know what I'm saying today? It's like, I'm the greatest, wonderfulest person who's ever, I've written more books than you even imagine, and people reviewed me and think I'm the greatest. That's usually how the book, the reviews go at the back, right? So that's not what he's saying. He's saying I made many mistakes, and hopefully if you do the right thing by listening to my book, maybe it'll help me get out of the problems that I've made and mistakes I've made publicly. That's essentially what he's saying. The humility is astounding, and I want to conclude with the following: this is not an easy process, but and we're going to push it forward as well. Is if you've not had a chance to do this, and you came just because, and to Siyum today, or you're seeing this, I'm going to challenge you to take this forward and to be inspired and to take this home. So if you're interested, take a look. You can just scan this QR, and this is the All Halacha app. Fantastic. The OU's not done so much pushing on this. It's a beta version still. It has Mishnah Berurah, it has Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I'm not the only person on the page. There's a lot of amazing people there who are doing great stuff. That's All Halacha app. If you want to just do the Halacha in the year, you can set this up. It's on any platform. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music. It's on all the podcasts. You scan over here, it takes you to the RSS feed. If you say listen on, you click listen on, it'll show you all the platforms that it's cross-listed on. Please hit this. And I want to end with the fact that the Rothman family was very generous to say that the first 10 people who say that they want to commit to this, and you'll sign up on this QR code, they're going to provide for the first 10 families the full hand Kitzur, pocket-size Kitzur in English, the art scroll, which I found was fantastic because whoever invented pocket-sized books deserves all the royalties. It fits right into the top pocket, and I used to, wherever I went, I had a Kitzur in my pocket the entire year. It is so easy. It's divided into 10 volumes, and it's so easy to do. If you're interested and you want to make that commitment and say, I'm going to try, do this year, scan this, submit your name, and we will send you a Kitzur as well. Sam, yes?
Just one practical comment. A lot of people found that having the dates, like it literally laid out, because it was so easy that you could just follow the schedule. I know a lot of people who were very
interesting
finished
okay.
because of that. Having that yearly with the dates, sort of
what
per year, I think is really phenomenally helpful because it's good for Chazara. And people don't think, and you look, you'll fall off a couple of days, you come back, you're on the schedule, you're still able to finish.
So that's a really great idea. I'm trying to think of how to do this again because the dates are complicated in the sense that there's the Hebrew calendar and the English calendar. And what the Art Scroll did, which is fantastic, is they actually made a forever calendar based on the Hebrew dates. Right? So they sort of removed the years and they just said on the 1st of Tishrei you'll be learning X. On the 2nd of Tishrei you'll be learning Y. And this way every year it's the same thing. I'm going to try to see if that actually makes sense in our calendar because it's not so simple. But Be'ezra Hashem, that's it. Thank you everybody for being a part of the process. Really just want to open up, if anybody, I know I do a lot of talking. It helps me stay awake during my shiurim. But if anybody wants to reflect, comments, observations, please feel free to jump in. And I look forward to the next project together, Be'ezra Hashem. Any floors open? Yeah, Moshe.
The closing, he closed the pasuk Lechu. I was reminded the yeshiva of Chachmei Lublin that presumably has a statement Lechu banim shimuli yiras Hashem alamatchem. So I heard a vod, and then Rav Krupke mentioned someone. He says, "It's a yeshiva. It should be boy banim. Come here, I'll teach you." She said, "No. When you go out into the world, the hope is that the yeshiva will have fortified you." I'm thinking maybe you're going to apply it to the halacha too. It's when we go. This is my own extrapolation.
Beautiful.
To this.
Go out.
It's really amazing. Go out.
Exactly.
It's got to stay with us.
He's not asking us to cloister ourselves. He's asking to live life. Just live life.
The
Educate.
Medrash. We're not just in yeshiva sales. Anyway, that was just the reflection. Now, I should say personally, Shalom and I, when we committed to this jointly, many of you know we learned Daf Yomi together, and we said, we'll each listen to it and at night go inside. And we did this for probably about 2-3 months.
Yeah.
Even though we fell off the wagon on the written, I think, in my view, I don't know if Shalom agrees, it solidified our commitment to continue. That was my reflection. And because it was like amazing, but again, we couldn't quite sustain that, but we sustained this.
That's like what the daf is like.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
One yomi runs into the other yomi.
What I can say is that really busy people are the ones who get a lot done, and that's a good example of.
I just say one thing. I just want to thank Rabbi Trump really for just being like taking all these things and starting new projects with the shul, with another project, which is unbelievable.
Above and beyond, thank you.
The Sunday morning, I started
was
with that. But how to bring everything into light, and it's just unbelievable. So thank
Baruch
you.
Hashem, it takes a chevra. If it was just me, it would be worthless. It's
No,
because there's people
You bring
who work
everybody
together.
back into everything. It's unbelievable.
I just want to comment on the
That's
yomi
even
aspect.
bringing
All
me
of
back
these
to
things
young Israel.
they're very large projects. Whether it's a 7.5-year daf yomi cycle, whether it's Mishnah yomis, whatever it is, but the fact that you can divide them down into very approachable pieces is, and I think the aspect of it is really not the finish. I think the aspect is the yomi, which means if you missed a day, you missed a day. Tomorrow's another day. Today, okay, like Rabbi Shreyer always says, okay, you missed yesterday. Today's another day. And so I think the yomi part of it is that you know you have a commitment to learn X amount. I always reflected, how did I know that daf yomi was working? Because if I wanted to go Gemara, we were on vacation. That's it. It's the same thing. You know, you may have a vacation, but you still have your phone with you. The feed's coming in, so you're going to spend a few minutes learning. So I think to me that's the most important aspect of all of this. Is that you know there's the commitments never end.
Spoken by a person who does Mishnah Yomi after the 5:50 million, does the Daf Yomi in the evening, and is apparently doing a lot of Yomi as well. So it is time of the day. If you want to know how, speak to this
Or night. There's 24 hours in every day.
Yeah, just if you want to be inspired, take a look at that schedule.